Lecture 19, Confucian Virtue.
In this lecture, we're going to be talking about some of the virtues that Confucius attributes to the exemplary person. I think I should begin by saying something about the word way. In a previous lecture, we talked about how the word Tao, meaning the way, was a word used in China to talk about the way the whole universe flows. And that is one use of the word. However, it's also used in the context of particular schools of thought to talk about their method for doing things. The assumption being that there is an appropriate way to go, and that way to go is going to be the way. Because the word way works for both contexts, we end up talking about the Tao in each case. So when Confucius talks about being committed to the way, he's particularly talking about, or committed to the Tao, he's talking about being committed to this idea of becoming an exemplary person, really blooming into a full, vibrant human being, participating in society with others. Now, in the last lecture, we talked a bit about one virtue, which I won't say much about directly here, namely li, or the virtue of ritual practice. In general, the idea being that if you develop this social vocabulary that's consistent with your society and learn how to really perform it, that's a virtuous kind of behavior in itself, and it also has many benefits with regard to social organization. Focusing on ritual, however, I mentioned last time, I believe, that it's important to somehow tailor it to your circumstances. And this is where the virtue of yi becomes important. Yi is the virtue of appropriateness. The idea here is that you don't just carry out the ritual, but you make it your own in some kind of way. And what's important about this is, again, the real sense that you ought to be involved in it. A personal presence is important to making these rituals really serve their proper function. And there's also the danger, if people don't make rituals their own, that they become fossilized over time. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, generation after generation, sometimes it ceases to have much meaning way down the line. So it's important to reinitiate each ritual, and each person needs to do that for themselves, each generation as well. Now, I think one of the easiest ways to get in touch with this idea of yi is to think about weddings. I kind of marvel at the number of magazines like Modern Bride, American Bride, probably there's one just called Bride, that basically have the same kind of information month after month. It shows lots of available wedding gowns and lots of services that provide various kinds of things that people feel that they need at weddings. But in almost all of them, there's an article talking about personalizing your wedding. Sort of nice things that you can do to really make it matter and seem very personal and meaningful. Now, in a way, this seems kind of ironic, because to talk about personalizing something to a mass audience where you don't know who's reading it and give some generalized principles of doing this does seem to be not exactly, it doesn't quite add up. But nevertheless, the idea is that people think it's really important that their wedding really be their own. Almost no one, I think, would be completely happy with a wedding where they felt that they just kind of showed up and went through the motions. But instead, people want it to have something to do with their identification of themselves and their sense of the relationship between two people. The term yi has been interpreted also as authoritative. And this translation suggests that you have to be the right person in order to be able to give a ritual its life. You couldn't send somebody to get married for you by proxy. That's just not how we understand the ritual. Marriage or a wedding ceremony is not something that proxies can really fulfill. You need to have the person who has the authority to get married, namely the person themselves involved in the ritual. Again, yi, the sense of appropriateness. Who is the right person in this situation? And tailoring it to your actual situation in terms of the relationships with other people. If you look at these wedding magazines, they will often say, spend some time with your flower girl. Well, there's a relationship, presumably, between a bride and her flower girl, and the suggestion here is reinforcing this connection somehow, making it seem to be something that you've really communicated is important and meaningful to you. Again, yi includes the notion that we touched on last time that to really participate fully in a ritual involves having your mind and body attuned to it. So you're really fully present in the ritual. Again, someone who, no matter what they felt inside, sort of listlessly said their wedding vows would not be someone that we would feel really happy to see get married. There ought to be a sense that the whole person is involved here. And this, too, is a kind of fine-tuning. And exactly how this comes about depends on the person. If someone thought it would be really cool to get married in a way that's very dramatic and took on a very different kind of stagey voice than they usually speak in, again, that would seem very strange. It's not appropriate because it's not appropriate to the person. The details of what makes something really your own sometimes are very hard to pinpoint. Similarly, what makes a demeanor convey real enthusiasm or convey something short of that, why is that one handshake better than another? It's maybe sometimes hard to say exactly what it is, but it's something that you can feel very palpably. And so this whole notion of yi is designed to suggest the importance of really tailoring your sense of the rituals, participating in the rituals in a way that is fully appropriate to you, your relationships, and your circumstances. Now, in connection with relationships, one of the most important virtues is shao, filial piety. This is probably one of the virtues that Confucius recommends that's well known in the West, in the sense that I think many Westerners think that if they know anything about Confucius, that the Confucian tradition values respect for your elders. Part of the point of filial piety is to direct attention to the family as the origin, the starting point, and the center of all relationships. The family here should be understood as the extended family. I should point that out. So talking about the family, the nuclear family that we frequently talk about in the United States would only be a part of that. Traditionally, in fact, the extended family all live together. So there'd be daily ways of reinforcing your relationships with members of your extended family. But here the idea is, how do you learn how to become an ethical person or to participate in society? Well, you start in your family. I mean, those are the first person that you relate to. The family, in other words, is the center of ethical life. Confucius actually brings this up when he is challenged by someone who asks him, well, if you're so smart, why aren't you in office? Another line from the Analects. Someone, when talking to Master Gung, said, how is it that you are not in public service? The master said, the book says, be filial. Only be filial and friendly toward your brothers, and you will be contributing to government. There are other sorts of service quite different from what you mean by service. Now, what he means there is that just being filial with your brothers, participating in the family, participating in ethics in these kind of immediate circumstances is already a kind of taking a role in government. How could that be? Well, think about cases where people don't have a very happy family life. Oftentimes, people that don't have a happy family life tend to make problems for people outside their family. And I think Confucius is pointing this up here, that learning how to interact harmoniously with your brothers, just in the context of home life, is fundamental to learning how to interact well with other people in general. So the notion of filial piety is in the context of understanding the life of the family as being the core of ethical behavior. It's the core, first of all, because that's where we learn. We extend what we learn in our family life to our relationships to people beyond our family. But also, there's a sense of real reciprocity here. And I think that sometimes isn't noticed in the concept of xiao. Xiao meaning the care for the elder by younger people.